guys. My name is Luke Pace, and welcome back for everyone who is already a subscriber to the channel. If you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe so you can see more great interviews, including the one coming at you right now. Always excited to have a professional MMA fighter back on the show. And this fighter who's coming off of two MMA wins, two finish wins, and is currently in Vegas. We're going to be talking to him now from Vegas, the fight capital of the world, and that is Raiden Kovacs. Raiden, welcome back to the show, sir.
Cool. Thanks for having me, brother.
Always great to have you. Let's jump into it. You train and fight out of Bowerhouse MMA. I recently got to see you fight in your last pro fight where you had a nice stoppage win to strikes. Now you're out in Vegas. I think it's a training trip. So break down, you and Coach Rob McGraw are out there in Vegas. So talk to me about what gym are you at, kind of what's going on, what takes you to Vegas?
Yeah, so this is my second time out here. I had when I was getting ready for my last fight, I was talking to my coach and I were talking to my management team, Sucker Punch. We were talking about wanting to go up the next level of competition, find more big guys because just about all heavyweights struggle with training, finding partners. And we weren't afraid to go outside of our comfort zone, find tougher competition. And I was like, hey, if you guys have any recommendations, what would it be? And they were like, oh yeah, we would just send you out to Vegas to work at Xtreme Couture with Eric Nixick and all those guys. And when that invitation is kind of given to you by your management team, you take advantage of that. You don't say no. So I said absolutely. So I was talking to my sponsors. They were very gracious in helping me kind of acquire the funds to go to fly out here, spend a week training. That was from my last camp, and it did so well that we're coming out here second time. And my goal is to just about every fight camp, if I can, God willing, to take a trip out here and train and get ready. Because just the level of talent. Not just the level of talent, but how welcoming everybody is and how willing everyone is to share knowledge has been great. And it was incredibly valuable in my last fight. And I'm pretty confident it's going to be incredibly valuable for this one.
That does make a lot of things. Obviously, a week you try to get the most out of it. So how often are you training? Is it 2 days? 3 days? How does this break down? Because I know you and your coach are trying to get the most out of your trip out there. And then, of course, we'll build up to the real fact you're on the show is to talk about your upcoming fight on November 17th. But I wanted to talk, about this unique training opportunity at Xtreme Couture.
Yeah, I generally do 2 days anyway. So when I'm out here, I just about do the same. Xtreme has so many high-level coaches and so many high-level pros that there's just about a class, 9 to 5. There's just about something going on. Both beginner and pro friendly, so you can kind of have your pick. That being said, I want to obviously, when you're doing 2 days, that's tough for anyone, especially with your heavyweight. My goal is usually 2 times a day. If I feel myself kind of redlining, doing too much, I kind of pull back a little bit to make sure I don't overtrain. But if I'm feeling good, I'm taking care, I'm recovering properly, 2 days is just about my average. And, especially here, you attend 2 classes, you're like, oh, it's only 2 hours. No, they train hard out here, safely, not dangerously, but everyone here is competitive. Everyone here is here to work with a level of intensity. So it takes, a considerable bit out of you. And if you're like me and you come, from the East Coast where it's very humid and you come out here in the desert, you feel like there's sawdust, like you're breathing through sand the entire time. And, you'll do a training practice and it'll just suck 6 pounds of water out of you. And you feel that when you're not used to it.
Sure. Well, that makes sense. And a big part I like about doing this podcast is getting the behind the scenes. A lot of fighters, obviously knowing your own body, knowing your limitations. Sometimes it's really important to push. Other times it's really important to recover. I'd say pretty much all pro athletes, not just fighters, pro fighters, it's working out and then recovering, whether the recovering is sleeping. People went through, sometimes people do cold plunges to recover. Sometimes people,
Mhm.
different nutritional shakes, those type things. Let's talk about the fact that I'm sure it's a cool opportunity for you. You got a opportunity coming up November 17th to fight in Milwaukee, Wisconsin for Anthony Pettis fighting championship. So how did that all come together, and what's your excitement level to kind of fight under Anthony Pettis? Obviously, former champion in the UFC, a known guy who's now doing his own promotions.
Honestly, most opportunities all come to me the same way, with a call from my coach or my management team saying, "Hey, we'll," and then from there, we see if it takes hold. Because sometimes we're being asked, sometimes we're the one asking. So there's been plenty of times where I've had an opportunity to come by, and I was like, "Hey, I feel good about this. Let's reach out." And we didn't get a reply, or the answer was just frank, no. Um, which that happens. So that's why I kind of tend to stay out of it, because if you were super involved in that, it would be like being like a door. It's like, I imagine being a door to door salesman. It's very taxing, and to be an athlete and then to do that on top of it's too much. And I've quickly found why people have management teams. They make your life so much easier, especially if you have a really good one like I do.
Yeah, that does make a lot of
Things
sense.
I don't have to worry about. And I can just Yeah, I can just focus on being the best athlete I can be, and that's really my goal. I have trainers, management team. I have mindset. The sports psychology mindset coach. Personal trainer to worry about other stuff. That way, I can just worry about being the best athlete I can be.
That does make a lot of sense. I know, having done some of the coaching, sort of the matchmaking that coaching
Mhm.
did. A lot of times, I'd encourage athletes, particularly at amateur level, that person falls through, and then it becomes kind of like, oh, I don't want to fight, so I wanted to fight that person. And
Mhm.
obviously, every fighter has a different strategy. Some fighters like to be very involved. I think it's obviously working for you. Being a heavyweight MMA fighter, you're always going to be fighting somebody with knockout power. Now, obviously, you're
Mhm.
also at any pro level, you're going to be fighting good athletes and people that can knock you out. We've seen that at 125 all the way up. But what do you, and you're a big heavyweight. I think you are
Mhm.
6'8", 6'6". And so
I'm
you're
6'6".
6'6".
Mhm.
Yeah. So you're a big heavyweight. Now let's talk about your matchup. What do you know about your opponent? You're 2-2 as a pro, coming off 2 wins. He's 1-0, obviously coming off his debut win. So what do you know about him, and kind of what's your thought process with this matchup?
Don't know too much about him, honestly. Again, I tend to kind of stay focused on myself. Know about him. I think he's a local to Wisconsin. I think he's a local Milwaukee guy. I know he's a Duke Rufus guy, who I don't know much about Duke Rufus, but I believe he was a very, very talented, very skilled kickboxer. And I think my opponent, I think, kind of shows that, obviously being under his tutelage. So I know he has a good arsenal of kicks. I know he kind of has a more kind of stand up tall, kickboxy style. And coming into the pro scene from his amateur, having decisive wins, it kind of reminds me of when I was, also an amateur going into pro, because I had a bunch of like first round finishes as well. So I'm kind of like, oh, cool. I'm familiar with this type of athlete. I've been in his shoes before, so got nothing but respect for somebody kind of taking on a more experienced guy, because there was a time where I was very, I didn't have any pro fights, or I only had one. I was taking on guys who had significantly more experience than I did. So hats off to that.
Yeah, that, I mean, that's very, very gracious, but it makes sense. I always say, when, particularly in amateur or early pro, early pro, I'd say, is like 7 fights, 8 fights and down. It can be very tough to find opponents. And there's always a balance between, like you said, when you were an early pro fighter, you were fighting guys with more experience. Now he is. And really, there's probably no truly completely equal experience matchup. It gets very tough So obviously you take the best matchup you can find. He's taking you on with more experience, coming off 2 wins. Obviously, you said he's coming off a great amateur into his pro. So I don't know a lot about Wisconsin. Is it considered at elevation? You guys are way out west for me. Is there an elevation concern? I know obviously Kane Vasquez, who was known as being a cardio guy. Now I'm going back in history, kind of gassed out at Mexico City because of elevation. So are you trying to get ready for elevation? I believe Vegas is, I mean, anything's more elevated than Pennsylvania, Virginia. Anything out here is flatlands compared to out west. But kind of what are your thoughts about conditioning as you head into Milwaukee? If I'd done my research, I would know what its elevation is.
Yeah.
But regardless, what are your thoughts on it? You're like, oh no, I didn't think of that.
Well, man, I don't know too much about that. I can kind of tell you, it's like, man, when you're heavyweight, you always feel like you're elevated, in elevation. I think it is a little bit of a scary kind of boogeyman. Not to say that it isn't a factor. It is, and I think you especially see it when you get to like high level competition where like these guys are like neck and neck. Any little advantage really does make the best difference. Um, but I think ultimately kind of comes down to just energy management, and that's been a skill set that I've I've struggled with at the beginning of my career, and I've really focused on improving it. And uh, while you can always be stress tested and go, oh shoot, I miscounted this variable. I'm more familiar with the system of how to deal with that. Because regardless, there's going to be certain days where you're just going to come out and you're going to have a great fight camp, and you're going to go into the cage or into competition and just go, man, I'm just not feeling it today. So I think that's why it's important to be consistent with your training, to develop strategies, and just have your body conditioned to pushing through that. Because ultimately, it's how you kind of run the system that matters. Less of oh, how good someone's cardio is, because we've seen plenty of super athletic guys burn out super early into a fight, and guys that look not very athletic have phenomenal cardio. So anyone who can just do a little bit of critical thinking can see, okay, it's not, there's more to it than that. I think it's a skill set, and I've been training really hard on having a skill set to manage that. In terms of, is there elevation? I don't know personally, but we'll see. It's not something I stress too much about anymore.
Well, it makes sense when you're training at the level that you are and you're working on energy management. That all makes sense. Do you want to give a prediction for this fight? And if not, obviously I respect that. But kind of when you envision this fight, what would be kind of the direction you'd want it to go, and kind of what are your thoughts to that? Some guys love to give predictions, other guys don't. But I always like to ask.
Man, I mean, we can give predictions. Obviously, I think most people have a pretty bad track history with it. But if you're asking me how I would like this fight to go out, as always, want to look for a finish. That's something, that's the kind of athlete I want to be. But specifically, what I'd like to see is a good high-paced match, in the sense that, oh, that's happening because I'm relaxed and I'm in the flow. During my last fight, Bronco, when I was fighting Bronco, I felt like I executed the game plan, but I could still feel I was stressed being in. I want to have a competition where we're seeing somebody who's more relaxed and having fun, because when you have fun, you tend to perform better. So this for me will kind of be a real test about that. So if everything goes the way I hope it does, I want to see a very active heavyweight bout with a finish at the end.
That would be fantastic. Now, you mentioned you'd already given a explanation that your sponsors helped you make it to Vegas to do the extra training.
Mhm.
That's obviously a special part. So, who are your main sponsors or people you want to thank? it's always a big deal, particularly amateur pro. Basically, if you're not fighting for the UFC or one of the big promotions, now the UFC kind of bans individual sponsors outside of Reebok or whatever else. But for you, it obviously makes a huge difference. I always try to give a shout out any small business owner, any person that wants the exposure. I think pros like you end up getting more exposure because you're very grateful for your sponsors. And so we always want to give time for that. Who are your sponsors? And kind of talk about them as we get to this point.
Yeah, no, please. I'm fortunate. I tend to have a lot more sponsors than most athletes do. I wish I could say, hey, I'm some silver-tongued charmer. I'm not. I just think just being honest and treating people like people goes a long way. And I've been fortunate to find a good support group of local businesses to support me. We have this is for if you're in the Frederick, Maryland area. Il Forno's Pizzeria, Frederick Wine House, Happiness is Balance, run by Allie. She has she's a firearms and like personal trainer, like massage therapist. Dylan Lightning Protections, Moy Reach Property Management. Those were the ones that or especially around this fight camp, have been a super big help and allow me to do what I do. A lot of people always see the athletes on top, and they don't really ask how do they get there. And the answer is frequently there's a small little support group that's been consistently helping them out. So I'm very thankful for the people who've helped me out.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And I always say, in this case, the Fredericktown, Maryland area, if you hear about any of these sponsors and you go and patronize them, make sure that they know that, that Raiden Kovacs sent you. That helps close the loop. It helps them know that what they're doing to help you is also getting their name out there. That's a big part, particularly small businesses. It's a big part. So really appreciate you coming on. It's exciting time for Bowerhouse MMA. To plug it, I just had a great interview with an amateur champion out of your gym, Nova Ace Kiska, who's a great guy. And on his interview, I plugged people to come over and listen to your interview. So same thing, go check out a teammate of yours from Bowerhouse MMA who just got a great armbar first round finish for his title. And he's right on that cusp of either another amateur fight or going pro. Bowerhouse MMA is really fantastic. Obviously, Xtreme Couture needs no introduction.
Yeah.
Either. So super excited. Can't wait to see what happens on November 17th. You're fighting for Anthony Pettis Fighting Championship out there in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Thanks so much for coming on the show. This is Luke Basin from MMA Fancast with special guest, heavyweight MMA fighter coming off two finishes in a row, headed into his November 17th fight, is Raiden Kovacs. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Luke. Pleasure as always.